Hello everyone, this is Brita and I'm here to do the weekly vlog of Ask a Witch, and today's topic is how to cast a magical circle. And so there's a lot of ideas about what a magical circle is and why one needs one or doesn't need one, those kind of things. And so I would like to talk a moment about what a magical circle is and then how one casts one to do magical work. So first off, a magical circle is a sacred space. We talked about sacred space last week. Sacred space is space that is protected space, space where you can do your magical workings without having to worry about intrusion of unhappy spiritual beings or malevolent energies, that sort of thing. It's also a space set aside, like a lot like an altar, for communion with the divine. And so, having that said, different questions that I've heard over the years are things like, can you cast a magical circle and leave it? Can you have a magical space all the time? It's always set. Can you cast a magical circle quickly? Those kind of things. So, first off, you can have a space where you cast a circle that is there all the time. I've been to many sanctuaries that have circles that are set up all the time. I honestly think a lot of the stone circles in Britain were there for ritual purposes. Some of them maybe not so much, but I think most of them were, and you know, people went and did rituals there. Just today, even at Stonehenge, the Druids go and do the summer solstice celebration there every year. So yes, you can have a magical circle that's in place all the time, but it's not going to be charged. It's not going to be active until you make it active. And so I might sneeze because we have a lot of cottonwood blowing through the air here, so just warning you. So can it be something that you can do quickly? Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I always told my students when I was teaching magical apprenticeships is that if you ever feel like you need to disappear, or you ever feel like you need protection quickly, you can, you know, take the energy and pull it around yourself like a bubble, and that creates a magical circle or bubble that can protect you. You know, so that sort of thing is absolutely possible to do. When you want to create a sacred space, all you have to do is cast a circle. And so let's talk a moment about what the steps are with that. Whenever you want to go and do ritual, and you can do it, you know, cast a magical circle inside your house or outside your house or really anywhere you are, the first thing you want to do is cleanse the space, just like when we were setting up sacred space last week. You want to cleanse the space. You can use something like a broom. A magical broom represents water, and so water, of course, is a cleansing energy, and you can use a broom to sweep away energy that may be negative. It's a good idea, if you are sweeping things away from a space, to do that counterclockwise. Counterclockwise is the direction of banishing, and clockwise is the direction, or sunwise, is the direction of building or growing. So when you're cleansing your space, you want to go counterclockwise. There's lots of ways to do this. You can smudge with some sage. You can use a broom. You can sing. You can use salt, whatever you want to do. I mean, really anything that feels like cleansing to you works fine. Once the space is cleansed energetically, then you want to choose your guardian's gates, or your altars, your elements. You want to, you know what direction is what, so that you can set up your protected space. And so you'll need an altar or some kind of marker for the east, which is air, for the south, which is fire, for the west, which is water, and for the north, which is earth. And you're going to want to set those up in sunwise fashion, and you're also going to want to cast your circle in that fashion as well. So once you have your altars designated, either, I mean, you don't need to have a big elaborate thing. You could have a big elaborate altar in each direction, but you don't have to. You could have, you know, something like a little stone or a candle or anything like that. And then different traditions have different ideas about how things should be done. One tradition that I followed for a long time would go around the circle with their hand and go clockwise around the circle 3 times, saying a rhyme that was something like, round and round this circle be bound, you know, kind of thing, where you create a circle, a magical circle first, and then call the elements in. Other traditions I've been in take an athame or a wand, and we'll go start with the element of air and call in the element of air, and then seal it. And sealing it would be taking your wand or your athame and drawing a pentacle at that quarter, and then going from there to the next element. And so you want to go you start with air when you're casting, and call in the element of air and seal the altar, and then move to the south and call in the element of fire and seal in the element, and call the element of water and seal the circle there, and then to earth and seal the circle there, and then take your wand and go to the air quarter, and then come into the center of circle to call in the Lady and the Lord. You want to always call them in after the circle is cast, because at that point you're in sacred space, out of time, and out of the physical, so you're kind of, what we say, you're between the worlds. And so that's where you want to invite deity into your circle, is when you are between the worlds. And likewise, when you get ready to dissolve your circle, you want to release Lady and Lord first, and then dismantle your circle. And when you take the circle down, you will start at the north and go in a counterclockwise fashion to dissolve the circle. So you unmake the seal at the north and thank the elements for, you know, being there and offering their energies to the circle. And then you go to the west and thank the water, and then to the south and thank the fire, and then to the east and thank the air, and then come back to north and open the circle. And a common thing that is said at most Wiccan circles that I've been at is usually, the circle is open yet unbroken. Merry we meet, and merry we part, and merry we meet again. And that's generally how it's done. You can do different things. Like, I've been to circles where casting a magic circle starts with a gateway, where a circle basically has already been partially cast, and people who are waiting to go into the circle are smudged at the gate and ask if they enter in perfect love and perfect trust. And of course the answer must always be yes, if you would like to be in the circle. So the question is asked, the person is smudged and allowed to come into the circle. And once everyone is in the circle is sealed, the elements are called, the Lady and Lord are called, and then the ritual begins. Now, once you're in sacred circle, you're in sacred space. You're in a space where you're out of physical, out of time. It's kind of amazing how how this can play out. I remember when I first started doing Wiccan circles, and we were very young fledgling witches, and we decided that we would cast a circle and do our ritual and be done in time for a TV show we wanted to watch. We very quickly learned that time passes differently in circle, and there would be times when we thought we were in there for just a few minutes or an hour, and it turned out to be 4 or 5. So yeah, that's pretty silly. So we decided after a very short period of time that circle would take however long circle takes, and whatever we had time for after that was what we would do. So funny how lives can revolve around TV shows, which is something that's becoming, I think, kind of a thing of the past. Not that TV is becoming a thing of the past, but being able to watch things on demand when you feel like it, when you load them up and stream them, is very different than it used to be. And so I think that sort of thing is a thing of the past. But once you're in circle and you've called the divinities in and you've called the elements in, you are asking for them to be guardians. You're asking for them to guard the space and keep you safe and to sit in observance of your offerings to them. Now, as I mentioned before, it's difficult for me to work with people who always are asking for things. I feel like asking for things is a separate situation than doing circle. If you're doing a Sabbath circle or you're doing some kind of celebration for sacred days, or an initiation, your job in there is to honor and to heal and to cleanse and to grow. It is not to ask for things. If you want to ask for things, you can always do a separate circle for that. I mean, not everyone agrees with me, of course. A lot of people feel like that when they do a Sabbath circle that it's perfectly appropriate to, because the goddess is there, perfectly appropriate to ask for things. And that's fine. If you feel like that, that's fine. I just feel like far too much ritual focuses on gimme, 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 and not enough ritual focuses on thank you, Mother Earth, for what you have given us. Thank you, Lord and Lady, for all the blessings that we enjoy. And I think that's important, and it's important for a couple reasons. One, I just don't think they hear it enough, and that's pretty obvious from the way we treat Gaia. But also, I think it's good for us to remember gratitude. I think we spend a lot of time griping and nitpicking and complaining about things, and we don't spend enough time saying thank you for all that we do enjoy. You know, there are plenty of people in the world who don't have food every day. There are plenty of people in the world who don't have a soft place to rest their head. There's plenty of people in the world who don't have heat or cooling or anything. And if you have those things, then you should be grateful for them. And the energies that provide those things for us is Mother Earth, because everything comes from her, right? So we have to say, I think it's important for us to say thank you at Sabbats and spend our time crafting ritual around that. If we want to sing a song or make an offering or cleanse ourselves from, winter into spring, things like that. Those are perfectly appropriate things to do in a magical circle. Now, a magical circle does not have to be a brief thing either. That's another thing that people have this idea, okay, well, we're going to go in, we're going to cast a circle, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this other thing, and then we're going to dissolve the circle, and then we're going to go do whatever else. And I think when you go into ritual like that, I mean, that's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like when we went to church. When I was a kid, I was Catholic, and we would go to church, and we would get a book, and the book would tell us, okay, sing the song now, sit down, say this, stand up, say that, kneel, do this other thing, go up, take your communion, go sit down, shake everyone's hand, and then you're done. And the formula ritual for me always felt very hollow. And I know witches who do them. I mean, I've been to circles that are very formula, and I get really no joy out of them at all. I get a lot more joy out of ritual that is allowed to organically happen. And by that, I don't mean chaos, but I mean going into circle with some ideas about what you'd like to do some singing, some dancing, some eating. Every culture in the world that does ritual, all the indigenous people around the world that create magic space and do circles of their own types. They roast a beast and they share food and they share water or wine or whatever they have, and they talk and they dance and they work out their stuff. You know, I remember one thing I went to, I guess it would be classified as a ritual. To me, it felt like a ritual, was when I was in Mexico. I was living in Mexico. And the Friday before Easter, Semana Santa, is the week before Easter, and it's a lot of stuff goes on. You know, there's ritual every single day. The banks all close, the newspaper isn't printed, the buses all only run to the basilicas, and the market swells into the churchyard. So it's a very, very focused time on the death and resurrection of Christ. And so there's a lot of different events, different days. And I went to one of I was there during that time. I went to a lot of things, actually. Went to one event that was called the Burning of the Judases, which happens on Friday before Easter Sunday, which isn't really a big deal. So Easter Sunday in Mexico is when it's all over with. You know, it's all building up to the moment of that early morning, and I could talk more about that later. But and so the Burning of the Judases, we all went down to Lake Chapala, which is a great big lake that's very shallow, and there was a big bonfire that had been made in the plaza there, and a lot of people had these paper mache dolls, and they were all kinds of things. I mean, there were a lot of devils, but there was also, you know, images of the mother-in-law, images of the landlord, images of the president of the country. Anyone you had a beef with, you know, that you wanted to sort that out. And everybody got together and did a lot of dancing and burned a bunch of stuff and sang and drank a lot of alcohol. And as soon as everybody got to the point where they were all comfortable, they started throwing those dolls on the fire. And, you know, when you throw mother-in-law on the fire, there's going to be some conversation. And so a lot of stuff gets worked out, you know, because people openly are working through their stuff together as a community. And that's a lot to me what ritual is about. It's about working things out in community and getting everything out on the table and having everybody see that you're not perfect, see through the social facades that we all hold every single day as we try to go through our lives. Circle is a place of freedom. It's a place of connection with divinity. And it's also a place of connection with your community. And so when you make a magical circle, you're in safe space, not just sacred, which is important, but safe space where you can express yourself in sacred ways and have it be accepted. So a magical circle, I think, is a pretty important thing. And I think many, many cultures view it as essential to mental health and emotional and spiritual health to have regular kinds of circles. Now, one of the topics that somebody had asked me to talk about was the topic of calling down the moon. And I am going to talk about that in July. But I'm going to briefly touch on it now. The idea of calling down the moon, which is something that is always done in circle, is never done outside of a circle, is the idea of embodiment of the supernatural. Not just acting out the supernatural, but actually inviting the supernatural to come into your being and speak through your lips. In voodoo tradition, they call it being ridden by spirit. And when spirit comes into the body, the body belongs to that divinity. It's everything that is done, everything that is said, is viewed and understood as coming from that divinity. And so again, safe space, sacred space. Calling divinity into one's being is no small thing. And having done it a few times over the years, I can tell you that it's incredibly intense. And the first few times, it feels very like you're not sure what's going to happen. And honestly, there's really no way to know what will happen. But it's also important to remember that the divinities that you connect with, you know, the goddess and God, and or however you embody those, they know your soul. They know who you are. They're not going to do anything that's going to harm you. I do know with like voodoo tradition, people will do things like walk on coals and, you know, pierce things and all kinds of stuff during that trance state of being embodiment of spirit, and not be harmed, not be burned by walking on coals. So there's something about that that's pretty powerful, and there's a lot of arguments about whether it's just mind over matter, or if it's the divinity protecting us, or whatever, showing us their power. Either way, Magical Circle is a space for that. It's a space for inviting spirit into the physical world to speak to us. And I've seen some pretty awesome examples of that. I remember one circle I was in with Janet Farrer and Gavin Bone that was held at a little shop in Loomis called Earth Central. And we were doing an initiation for Deborah Luna. And Janet had asked me to hold one of the quarters and to help cast the circle. And asked me if I would help with the initiation. And I said, of course. I'd known Deborah for a long time at that point. And so, you know, if you don't know who Janet Farrer is, just look her up online. She's been writing books about Wicca and Wiccan tradition in the British tradition for decades, literally decades. And many people kind of worship the ground she walks on. She's a very intense person, very watery, Scorpio, Cancer kind of combination. And she is one of those people who, when she calls Goddess into herself, she disappears. And so we were doing circle, and her eyes went hollow. And when I say hollow, I mean it was just black. And Gavin leaned over and said, "Janet's gone." And she was clearly embodying the goddess. It was really quite impressive. I've seen this a few times, though never so strongly as I did with Janet. And it's something that I'll never forget. And it made me never doubt that calling divinity into oneself is possible. But again, it's something that really only takes place in sacred space. I think that you probably could call on divinity to protect you or to walk with you in certain situations, you know, if you're in danger or whatever. But generally, when we call down the moon in circle, it's a pretty powerful experience for all involved. Now, during the process of Magical Circle, one of the things we generally always do is we always have an offering of cakes and wine, or cakes and juice, or cookies, and, you know, whatever we have. My favorite things to bring to Circle are homemade cookies or brownies or something like that, and homemade wine or mead. Those things to me feel like the right things, but people bring and use different things. And the idea is that you bless those. And one of the parts of ritual that I've seen done in every circle I've ever been in is the offering of cakes and wine to those in the circle. And the cakes are blessed, and the wine is blessed with a chalice and a blade. And there's words said that basically are the communion of the masculine and feminine. So with blade and chalice to bless the wine, we call that the symbolic great rite, which is the energy of masculine and feminine conjoined, which is what, of course, creates all life. And so that energy is pretty powerful. The actual great rite, of course, is physical act of connection or sex in circle, which is not generally done by beginners, and I've never seen it enacted in a circle with a lot of other people. I know that it is done in private situations, but it is something that is considered incredibly powerful and incredibly sacred. So generally in a group of people, it's done symbolically for obvious reasons. And so we bless the cakes and we bless the wine and we pass them around and we say in clockwise direction, may you never hunger and may you never thirst. And we take the chalice and pass it to the next person and say the same thing until it goes all the way around the circle. This is offering sustenance. It's very like the whole Holy Communion in the Catholic Church in a lot of ways. It's viewed as taking in prasad, I guess, is another term that's used in India, which is blessed food that is viewed as something that is very good for you to eat, because when you eat blessed food, you are taking divinity into yourself. And so, so casting the circle, calling in the quarters, doing whatever other things you have planned. Generally, one of the last things that you do is the symbolic great rite and blessing of the food and passing the food and wine around. And then when everybody's done doing everything, then we thank the Lady and Lord and offer that they can go or stay if they will, and celebrate with us, because mostly after you're done with circle, everybody eats and drinks and it's a big celebration. I've gotten to the point in my life where I rarely will dissolve circle until the next day or the last person leaves, depending upon what kind of circle it is, because I think it's nice to celebrate with the sacred circle intact. The circle can always be dismantled, I guess you could say, later. It's not an emergency. And if you let the elements and the goddess and God know that they are welcome to stay and celebrate with you, but they are also free to go if they have other things they want to do, then I think you're being respectful. And I think becoming more familiar, more family with the supernatural that is in the circle with you. When you call the elements, they do come, and when you call the Lady and Lord, they do come in attendance. The energy does come into the circle. So that puts us at 3 minutes short of a half hour. And so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. And also I'd like to say that next week we'll be doing an hour, because next week we're going to talk about the sacred days, what days we celebrate and why, what they represent. And the focus then after that will be on the holiday, which is Thursday of next week, Blita, which is the summer solstice, or the longest day of the year. And there's a lot of symbolism associated with that. That's pagan in ancestry. Some of it's Saxon, some of it's Celtic. We'll talk about some of that, and talk about some of my own experiences with Litha, because Litha is pretty powerful and it's had some pretty strong impacts on my life. I'm sorry that I'm a little subdued today. I'm kind of going through some things and working through some things, and so I'm quieter today. So if you have any questions, then feel free to ask, and if I don't have any questions, then feel free to type them in later on about the circle if there's anything that you're confused about or want to ask more information about. I hope that the information given today was helpful in terms of how to do a circle, how to call a circle, and what it means, what everything means. But if there's anything I've left out or been unclear on, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all next week for the sacred days. And then the last Wednesday of June, we'll do daily ritual. We'll do a program on daily ritual. What kind of things can you do daily that can help you? And there are times in my life when I do a lot more daily ritual than other times. And it has to do with what's going on in my life and what kind of lessons I'm learning and that kind of stuff. So I'll talk about that too. So since I don't see any questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And again, I would love to do readings for anyone. If anyone has anything they want to ask, I'm happy to do readings. Readings for half an hour, $25, which is very, very cheap. Most of my friends who do readings charge almost twice that for half an hour. I just can't. An hour is 45, and I'm happy to answer all the questions that you want to ask in that time. So let me know if you'd like to do a reading, and I'll schedule one with you. And or if there's any kind of consulting that you'd like to do about some problem you're having that's supernatural in basis, I'm happy to do that as well. So thank you so much for being here and for tuning in, and I will see you all next week. Okay, bye.